Think we're ready, Robert.
Well, hello, everyone. I just wanted to make sure that the wonderful COABE intro is all set. Very much looking forward to being with you all. I just want to make sure that sound is coming through. I believe there was some sound issues, but if that seems to be resolved, just welcome everybody. My name is Robert Breitbart, Director of Educational Partnerships with Burlington English, and it's great to be with you as I celebrate my 33rd year in adult education. And with years comes great innovation and change, and that's what you're going to see today. So hats off, cowboy hats off to our wonderful friends Javier, Maria, Jen, and many of you may know the wonderful guy Anson going to present today. So this really is an excellent topic, because again, as workforce is changing and just our communities in general are changing, obviously we've got to up our game for those that we serve. And in Burlington English, we like to say that we know this is coming because 33 years ago, the person who onboarded me said, yeah, we really just do adult language arts. And so I'm so glad that that's not the feeling anymore, but that rather we're meeting the needs, all the needs, as many as possible, of our learners. And so beyond just their standard conversational language needs, we in Burlington recognize that our teachers out there need to help our students get future focused as early as possible. So no longer waiting just as they progress up through ESL, but let's start helping our learners think about their futures as early as possible. So what you see on the screen is what we do in Burlington English. So this is our core course. And so we help teachers have all the tools ready to do more than just general English. We help them really put the W in WIOA and get learners thinking about all the possibilities that your programs can offer to assist them with. And while I hear it all the time, hey, Robert, I'm a really good conversational English teacher, but I'm not a trained career counselor. Same here when I was teaching. So as you can see on the screen, we like to give teachers everything that they need to really help students understand that we're here for them along their career pathway, and that we can do more than just teach English. And there's whether it's IELCE, IET, pre-apprenticeship, apprenticeship, workplace programs that we can be involved, we can support all, and thus the necessity for taking a look at measurable skill gains. We also like to say that, let's help students not do what I did, change my major 4 or 5 times in college. Let's help learners, explore careers. What we've got them in ESL, so when they, are ready to get those, whether move on to collegiate study or career technical, that they've made the right choice and that they've got a leg up when they enter into those trades, those certification courses. So again, in Burlington English, all of your learners can do that. And as you can see, I just highlighted Save to Portfolio. Your learners create a digital portfolio that stays with them during their entire journey and really helps make things their own. And that's what you're seeing right here. So again, you can help all of your teachers help their students as the minute they walk in the door, brand new, know that this is more than a place to learn English and how we can help them move on to get a job now, get a job in the future, and improve their job skills. And so with that, just know that I've got dozens and dozens and dozens of friends all across the country ready, willing, and able to help you out. So please reach out to us at burlingtonnews.com/contact. We'd love to help you do everything that you hear that these good folks are going to be explaining to that. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to our friends at COABE and our very, very distinguished panelists. Enjoy this great presentation. Thank you, friends.
All right. Let's get the show on the road here with some fantastic information from some world-class individuals on the topic of assessment. Let me get the PowerPoint set up here. Boom. We looking good? Yes. All right. I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and want to thank Robert for the great introduction and COABE for hosting this. And I want to thank the fact that we have 356 people that are interested in assessment after lunch. I mean, I think this is setting a land speed record for interest, and we have a great set of panelists here that will not disappoint. I want to thank everybody for putting in your information in the chat so we could see who you are. If you're just joining on, please put that ham sandwich down or that tortilla and taco down and put something in the chat to let us know who you are. But I want to get started here and talk about who we are. So starting with me real quick here, Anson Green. I've been in adult education for almost 25 years on all kinds of different levels, currently doing digital and automation upskilling for our refugee and immigrant workforce at Tyson Foods. And as a hobby, I just love measurable skills gains and assessments. And I'm happy to have everybody joined here today because we need to do so much more on this topic. And we've got some great research that we want to share with you today to get us there. I'm going to turn it over to Maria here, and she can tell us a little bit about what she does in Nebraska. Maria.
Maria Elena Oliveri. I'm Associate Director and Research Associate Professor at the Burroughs Center for Testing at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln, and I'm part of the ASAP project and Create Network.
All right, Javier, coming from Massachusetts.
Hello, everyone. I'm very thrilled to be here today. So my name is Javier Suárez-Álvarez. I am a research associate professor at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, the Center for Educational Assessment, and I'm currently the project director of the Adult Skill Assessment Program. There's a project recently funded by the Institute of Education Sciences, so by the U.S. Department of Education. I will be happy to, walk you through some of the work that we are doing that I hope is of your interest. Thank you all for coming today.
All right, finally, Jen Vanek. Please, Jen, give us some introductions, and then you can tell us a little bit about creating.
Sure. I'm Jen Vanek. I'm Director of Digital Learning and Research at the EdTech Center at World Ed. We provide technical assistance and do research to help educators understand how to leverage technology to support learning. And I am joining this call as a co-leader of the Create Adult Skills Network, which you'll see in a second. This CREATE stands for Collaborative Research for Educating Adults with Technology Enhancements. This is a research and initiative funded by the Institute of Education Sciences of the U.S. Department of Education. IES has funded 6 research projects that are going to span about 5 years and all focus on use of technology in adult education. Maria, Anson, and Javier are all working together on one of the projects that you'll hear about later. I am actually, in addition to co-leading the Adult Skills Network, I'm working on some research on building the EdTech tool skill blocks. So I encourage you to please follow the work of the Adult Skills Network of CREATE. we are seeking to bust down the research to practice divide to make sure that researchers are speaking frequently to practitioners and that practitioners have a chance to follow along with the research as it's unfolding. So please do check out the Create site, sign up for our Twitter and LinkedIn posts, and follow along. Thanks, Anson.
All right, fantastic. Yeah, it's fantastic to see the research components that we need so bad in adult education finally getting out there. These projects have been underway for a little bit over a year, some of them, and now we're starting to see some things that we can actually think about putting into practice. But part of what we want to do today, and part of what these projects are based on, is what you, the adult practitioners, adult learner practitioners out there need, and what you think would work well in your different contexts. So that's my call to action for you to be participatory today in the chat. Because we're going to be asking you some questions to help us build a better assessment model. To set that up, I'm going to turn it back over to Maria, and she's going to talk us a little bit about this ASAP project, Adult Skills and Assessment Program. Maria, please.
I'll be giving a high-level overview of the project, and then Javier is going to go in more depth about what we're doing in ASAP. So we are, as Anson mentioned, working with different stakeholders. We're multidisciplinary. So our stakeholders include adult education practitioners and leaders, Anson representing a Fortune 100 upskilling leader, and university researchers from University of Massachusetts, University of Nebraska, Lincoln, and University of Memphis. And we are engaging in a 5-year research project to develop next generation assessment models and tasks to better assess skills in meaningful, informative ways for different stakeholders. Our intent is to share what we're doing and to learn from you about what is needed, what do you need, what kind of tasks, what kind of score reports, what information is useful to you. So please let us know in the chat, and otherwise, please contact us at if in the ASAP project or part of the larger Create network.
All right, fantastic. Let's move this along now and really think what we're talking about today. And I wanted to applaud everybody for chiming in the chat and letting us know what your assessment needs are, because we're going to be saving this chat and combining that with the information. We did this as a 3-hour session at COABE in Atlanta and had the house packed and got a lot of great information, but we are in a information gathering phase also. So I want to keep underscoring that. But when we think about what we're doing here in assessment, I want to tell you about this session. So we're going to be talking about the future of assessment in this ASAP project. We want your feedback. We're going to give you some sample example models of what we're talking about. And then, really, how do we fit this into the national reporting system? Probably half of you joined, if not 3/4 of you, because you saw NRS in the title of this, and that causes some sort of emotion within you. And you said, I want to find out more about this because I think it's a section of what our work is that we really need to make some enhancements on. We're going to really talk about the applied context of assessment. And I see that coming through the chat from some of your comments, and I appreciate that. This session is not about a test that we have ready for you to use tomorrow. So one thing I have to counsel here is some patience, because it's a research project. And so we're gathering information, researching best-in-class models from around the world. Some of our presenters here are some of the best-in-class on the topic of measurement. And we are going to really want to inform them and help them guide this model, but it's going to take some time to build this. We're not talking about doing additional tests, more testing. We really want to think about this in the context of the adult education and family literacy context and the policy context. We know there's a lot of gripes and complaints about testing, over-testing, the types of testing, multiple choice, the tests don't tell us what we need to know about students, etc. That's the stuff we want to hear more about and that we want to build solutions for. Our context today is contextual to work largely. So we're talking about integrated education and training and workplace models. So one thing we can kind of all plant the flag on and agree on is that we are really operating from assessment and testing models that are very much out of date. These are models that come from generations when many of us, myself included, went to school even before then. So they're very archaic models. The world has changed, work has changed, and the technology available for us in terms of how we can measure learning has dramatically changed. So it's really way overdue for us to really move forward with some new advanced models. So I want to talk about assessment and what do we mean when we hear that word? And everybody hears something a little bit differently. And so I want you to think about assessment. When you hear that word, you may have an emotional reaction. You may think things. Think about that for a second here. And I want to give you an analogy, because when we have a teacher in a class like this, and she says, "Oh, class, we're going to talk about technology at work." Well, this teacher is probably thinking about her work, and she's thinking about a PC and Microsoft Word and the internet and Outlook and all these kind of things. But when she says those words, technology at work, her students that are in the workplace in a variety of contexts see all kinds of different things in their mind, because they're thinking about their work in the context of digital in their work. So when we think about assessment, it's the same way. That teacher's thinking about a PC. All these teachers are thinking about all these different devices. So when I say assessment, I think something. But what do you think? So in the chat, tell us right now, what do we mean when we say assessment? And I'm going to turn it over to Jen, who's going to facilitate this section. Jen, take it away.
Yeah, so please locate the chat. So this webinar has both Q&A and chat, but you've been working in the chat. So think back to what you think when we say assessment, what comes to mind? If you could just list up to 5, list as many as you like in here. Think about different types of assessment that you might employ, that you might have your students in your program take. So I'm seeing some diagnostic, formative, summative. I'm seeing a bunch of standardized assessments, placement, more general terms like qualitative. Ooh, I'm seeing portfolio, alternative assessment coming through. This is great. So keep them coming. Where we're going with this is that we do want you to think about assessment broadly, not just something you do once or twice, and definitely not something you just always do in the same format. We also need you to think about assessment in terms of its purpose and timing over a term, an instructional period, or a training period, and how that purpose and place and time might impact the types of assessment you're going to share. So placement assessment can be used at the beginning of a term or instructional period. For placement, placement assessments could be formal. They could provide information about where learners are going to start in the learning trajectory that you have available to them. Interim assessments could be given to your students at any time during the year, and they monitor their growth towards standards or their learning goals. These could be developed by instructors, or they could be those more formal NRS approved tests that you just use to gauge interim progress. And then finally, we've got summative assessment, which is offered at the end of a learning cycle, end of a term, end of a training period. Formal, likely you're probably thinking about NRS approved tests here. They could also be college training final exams, capstone projects, or industry recognized exams. The second way we want you to think about assessment is in their purpose or their place in the actual instructional sequence. So not over this broad arc of time, but actually within an instructional sequence on a particular topic. So we think about these in terms of diagnostic, formative, and summative assessment as components of a balanced assessment system, with diagnostic assessments showing what students know already. Formative assessments like exit tickets, display questions, checks on student work, showing learning gaps, showing progress, and these things actually shape instruction. And then again, summative assessment, which is as an evaluation of student learning measured against some standard or a list of objectives. And these could be unit tests, culminating projects, standardized assessment, or even demonstration of a skill in a workplace could be a summative assessment. So again, the point of this is just to get you activated, thinking about assessments broadly. And as you can see here, we have some of these less considered forms of assessment. A couple of these actually, well, we saw a portfolio flyby in the chat.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we've got these alternative assessments like checklists, monitoring products, interviews, self-evaluation or peer evaluation, stealth assessment, which could be task observation or performance monitoring, checking applications data to see how people are using automated systems or computerized systems. And then really important for thinking about later within the rest of this webinar are performance-based assessments, those demonstrations, observations of what students can do that are measured or gauged against a rubric. And these could be just full-on demonstration and observation of work or some sort of culminating activities or portfolios. So
Fantastic.
to push into the conversation a bit further, back to Anson.
Yeah, man, I'll tell you what, thank you for the chat, folks. This is amazing. And some of the stuff that was jumping out at me too, I think I started the word pain 3 times. And compliance or required by the grant. So there are these other overlays that I think are so important for us. When we hear the word assessment, you know, it has this emotional context for us also. But we really saw a lot of those great examples. But I gotta really crush everybody's dreams here with all those great things and get into the policy context in the national reporting system, because that's what we're all working within when it comes to our federal funding. And so I want to spend some time talking about this so that you can kind of see your hopes and dreams embedded into where we want to go, because we want to build best in class around what you guys are saying in the chat is needed and what you think of when you think of assessment. We want to fit those pieces together and meet that policy context and that compliance that a lot of you were saying in the chat also. And of course, for that is the national reporting system. So I want to refresh ourselves. We're all very familiar with this, but when we think about the national reporting system and these measurable skill gain types, a lot of our focuses have been how are we building within the context today? Now, things can evolve in the next few years as our test development evolves. And we're going to be working on the policy side of things so we can not only have great tests, but also a policy context where these things can thrive and grow. But when we think about the last 2 types of measures that we see in the national reporting system, which are my favorite things to talk about. It's the type 4 progress milestone and the type 5 skills progression. These are allowed for integrated education and training. I'm sure many of you are using these already. But you're wondering sometimes, like, what kind of tools are available? How can we measure this? I need something that makes it more objective for us to do the measurement. When we look at these, they really give us clues that I think are so important for us on the progress milestones. This focus on the employer, a milestone from the employer or a training provider. What does that mean? How could we measure something like that? Do we have a test to do that? We don't think of our standardized tests as being tools that would do these kind of things. But for the ASAP project, we are thinking about how can we build to address that kind of criterion about a milestone that employer might give us for a learning objective. And then when we look at the skills progression, we see also these words, occupationally focused, attaining technical skills, trade-related benchmarks, knowledge-based exams. Those are things that we don't think of with our current available assessments in the NRS. They don't come to our mind immediately and probably are elusive if we try to get there with those tests. But we want to build a context where we can have tools and models that will be able to allow us to measure those types of things, because that's what employers want. That's what job seekers want to be known for, how they're learning and be able to measure that context of. So we're thinking about the current context of the NRS, but really wanting to push the envelope of how can we get there with tools that are easy for individuals that are on a call like this to use and to manage. So I want to turn things over. We heard about pain points and compliance. I want to hear now in your chat, what are some of your biggest assessment challenges? So put them in the chat here and think about what are some things that you have a challenge with assessment. I wrote some things down here. that we hear a lot. They may be some of yours. Time and cost, Regina says. Let's hear some more. Time and money. Oh boy, money's coming up a lot. Getting students, oh, it's going too fast. I can't read it now. Maria's going to have to take a lot of good notes here. I know she's doing that for us. Frequency, validity, test assessing soft skills and oral language. Love it. Scheduling the tests. So time, what is it? How much time does it take us to do this? I know a lot of our tests are very time consuming, and that becomes a real burden. So that's one thing that Javier, Maria, and others we're talking about is how can we find more efficiencies in the way we're assessing learning so it doesn't get in the way of keeping students from the actual learning themselves. So you guys are echoing much of what I had captured here and adding a lot of other things. Outdated tests, we see that all the time. So I really like, I'm just reading through some of these things. Fantastic feedback from everybody here. But these are constraints, and these are things that we have to address. I call it the assessment elephant in the room. But when we think about these things, you guys are saying them, over testing, time and money. We heard that immediately coming out of your mouths when you were chatting there. The technology that we don't have or that learners can't use. And this is a big focus for us in ASAP because we want to make sure that if we use technology applications, that doesn't become one more hindrance to measuring. Specialized training, it takes time away from instruction. This is, we're not telling you guys anything here. You guys were saying this all in the chat, and I appreciate that. But these are the things we want to build around, and we're going to mine this chat for information because I think all of us in the ASAP group ask ourselves continually, like, what are the things that are going to keep assessment from being more popular and more deployable in the context of a busy adult learner's life and a busy adult education teacher's life. And it's only when we hear those from you that we can build those around those kind of constraints. But, you know, you may be thinking to yourself, you know, okay, this all sounds great, but there's going to be some miracle at the end of the tunnel here because we can't see this in what we're doing now with the test we have right now. And so this is what the challenge that Maria, Javier, the ASAP team stepped up to say, we're going to address this and create that miracle for adult learners and for adult learning in the US. So I'm real happy to be on that adventure with them. And so I'm going to thrust everybody back into an activity. Y'all just had lunch. You're probably getting drowsy here. We're going to keep you on your feet with some activities here. And now this is another one where I want you to think of a skill, something that you have had to teach if you're a teacher or assess if you're an administrator. So did you teach students a skill? What was it? Just write it down. Nothing fancy. We're not going to ask anybody to sound it out. This is all in the personal world of your own notepad there. But if you're an administrator, what have you had to measure? And people are putting it in the chat. I love it. Put it down there. Write it down in the chat if you'd like. Resume writing, soft skills, inferences, how to use Zoom, filling out an application, writing essays. All right, you guys are coming through here. Using emails, slope, reading a bus route, understanding how to use a walkie-talkie. All right, I see a lot of contextual things in here. I see a lot of oral language skills, love that. Basic computer skills, a lot of technology coming up here. So you guys got it down. This is exactly what we're looking to hear is the context of what you're doing. And you guys actually had some of these things I wrote down here. Look at me, I think, oh, I got to put this down because they may not have any ideas. You guys are full of ideas. You don't need me to give you any examples here, but they're all very contextualized, right? These are real world contextualized examples. But when we think of our current tests that we have in the NRS, ask yourselves, to what extent do they measure these things well? And I think you can put your answer in the chat if it's publishable, but I don't think you can say they answer them very well at all. So really happy to have you think about that. I want to give you an example of what I'm having to do in my work right now. I was working on this all morning, actually. Maria's going to help me out here, but I'm going to give you my example. So I mentioned that I'm working on automation, robotics, and training second language learners, immigrants, and refugees at Tyson Foods how to use this advanced technology. So I'm developing workplace integrated education and training operator programs I'm targeting NRS levels 3 and 4. So I'm talking y'all's love language and things you understand. But we're talking about super contextualized ESL. We have over 260 unique terms and 7 major procedures with over 200 steps. So that's what I'm having to build curriculum around and having to build training modules around for all of our team members in the United States that are learning how to use this robotics. But when I think about this, and then I ask myself, okay, how am I going to assess that? I really start to wonder, how could assessment help? So Maria, come in here. Yes, and talk us through some of this.
So Anson, let's look at the task that's you're doing and the workers, employees are doing, and the training that you're building around it. And so think about what would be the steps you would follow to design and develop the program.
Right. That's the first thing I have to do. And this is what we're doing in our IET programs is we think about, all right, what do we need to be measuring? And for me, the first thing I always do is I just go observe. And this is what a lot of you do when you're building your curriculum is like, what is the work context? What does the worker have to see? What do they have to read? What do they have to measure? So when you're looking at these pictures right now, what are the types of assessment and literacies you see here? You can put it in the chat, but look at these things and say, okay, this is the context of learning. How would I measure these things? What would I do here? Reading graphs and charts. So Maria, thank you. Rita's got a comment in there. Digital skills coming in, reading a diagram. Again, you guys are coming document literacy, groupings, graphing. Fantastic. We've got oral language in there. There's 2 people communicating, so they've got to talk to each other. So fantastic. You're capturing the spirit of this. This is what you guys do every day. These are the literacies, the types of competencies that I see here. You're seeing them. But then I ask myself, and Maria asked me.
So how would you identify what skills would need to be learned?
Yeah, how would we identify
these
those
literacies?
things? Yeah, we would have to go in there and look at the reading levels of these materials and measure the reading abilities of these workers. Our native language literacies. We see some language on the computer screen. It's in Spanish, poorly written Spanish, but it's in Spanish nonetheless. How could I use that in the context of assessing? Because I think if someone had a grasp of Spanish literacy, they might have a better grasp of understanding the technical competencies here. So we're going to move here and go to the next phrase here. And I'm going to get some counseling here from Maria because there's so many dimensions to this learning. And Maria's really quizzing me. So ask me some more questions, Maria.
So how much English do workers need for the job?
Well, it's really puzzling to me because when I go to the job site and I interview workers, many of them speak no English. And they're using this technology, they're getting trained in this technology, but then they need English in certain contexts. For example, when they're working with, staff members that don't speak English, or maybe they're that speak English, or their bosses are not bilingual. Or they have to read a manifest or a work order. Y'all saw a picture of that work order. It's in English. So there are these super contextual components where they have to read English. They're forced to read English. Some of our robots do not have the screens in Spanish, so they have to know how do they tackle that screen and what is the English skills in that. And so one of the things I've been doing is taking the found English that I see in procedures or in written documents, and I'm taking that and trying to first off determine what level it is. And so I'm using ChatGPT, like many of us are, to determine the reading levels of some of these materials so that I can start to close the gap between what is the English they need to read, what are the skills they need to do, what is the digital competencies that they need to have, and what are the embedded or the existing skills of that learner. Are they literate in their own language? Do they know any English? And matching those two, but it's a really messy process and very difficult to do. We're dealing with Burmese workers, Marshallese workers, Spanish workers, English speakers, sometimes on the same shift. And so we're trying to match all these things at once. Assessment does not help me really. I mean, I'm really using a lot of informal assessments to do this. So I have kind of written off a standardized test or anything like that right now because I need something that's more customized. And so tell us more about where this is going, Maria, in terms of the future of assessment.
So that has implications associated with AI and has implications associated with leveraging technologies in order to create more customizable solutions that understand your worker, your employees better, their language proficiencies, and then learning about different types of assessment. So how would you measure all these various levels of English proficiency or different multiliteracies? So you can do it through different forms of assessment, like it was indicated in the chat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and these are the things that you saw people already identifying. So this is a very savvy group here, using digital scanners, reading barcodes. What's a barcode? You have to teach these content. So native language literacy. So these are all things that the group here is already self-identifying that they're doing. The gap that we want to learn about is how does this fit into the context of assessment and how do we build assessments for this? But it's really good, and this is what I know instructors out there are doing. When you think about these different audiences for our assessments, we have our education and life audience and our employment audience. And so when you're working with a business like Tyson Foods or your own companies, I saw a lot of people putting stuff in the chat. I see two kind of dimensions that people view learning around. So the teachers out there think of like, do I have the data to support this learner? It's the instructional context. The employer's thinking, does this person have the skills to do the job safely, or can they be trained on this job? In the programmatic context, you're thinking, how do I report learning for my class to my boss and to my state context, my state reporting system? The business is thinking, do we have the data to determine who could be a trainer? Who needs additional support? How would we know this? When we think of life contexts, we want the learners to be self-aware of their own skills and abilities. And so there's this knowledge, skills, and abilities. Do they have what they can when they leave the classroom, leave our classes, and do something with that information in life because they're more self-aware of their own skills and abilities? And the business is continually thinking, who could I promote? How would I know that they have the skills to be a leader or do the competencies? So there's all kinds of different dimensions and contexts that happen with assessment. We always think about our own, of course, but there's all kinds of other stuff going on there. And really the proof in the pudding here is to what extent does our current assessment system help us do any of these things very well? And I think you can put it in the chat if you think so, but I think we all can agree there's a lot of room for improvement here in the current tests that we have and the current models that we have. And so that's what ASAP is all about. So I'm going to turn it over to Javier, and he's going to tell us all about ASAP. Javier, just say next when you're ready to go to the next slide, please.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Anson, Jen, and Maria. Like, I think it was like the perfect background to, explain and justify why we are doing what we are doing and what we're trying to achieve. No, just let me start by pointing out that the Adult Skill Assessment Program is managed by the UMass Center for Educational Assessment in collaboration with Nebraska and Memphis, as Maria previously mentioned. No? Like, we are funded by the U.S. Department of Education, and we are part of a bigger network. We are in total 6 projects that were funded at the same time by the Department of Education, and that we are looking to collaborate with each other. No, like Jen is part of this CREATE network lead. Next. So I would like to introduce, because I think this is probably one of the most exciting parts of this work. Yeah, you can go, there are several animations there and some. So here we are trying to, bridge, as we previously mentioned, the academic and the workplace. So one of the biggest first steps that we did in this program was identifying what are the leaders in the field, in the academic field, but in the workplace field, in adult education, in educational measurement. And one of our main goals is to put together all of these people in a room every few months and trying to make progress together. No, obviously there are some overlaps, there are some ideas that we need to still operationalize, but the main idea is to put this group together and trying to figure out how we can identify the needs in the field and provide solutions. No, so if you go next in the slide, actually have a very fresh picture from last week. We spent 2 days here in Amherst, Massachusetts. This is part of the meeting, part of the people in the meeting, and we were, discussing day and night almost ideas and ways to, influence the field to provide resources that can support learners. So if we go next. So basically our mission is the first mission is to discover and document the assessment needs in adult education and workforce development. No? The way that we're trying to do this, to meet these needs, is by developing online banks of literacy and numeracy for adult learners, adult educators, employers, and researchers. But if we go to the next slide, I will explain more in detail what we mean by this, no? And I will connect with some of the points that were raised before, no? Let's say most of assessments right now in adult education and probably also in K-12 follow a top-down strategy. So for example, in the case of the adult education, in adult education, we have NRS assessments that actually provides helpful information, even at some of them provide individual profile reports, but we need to remember these assessments were, in most of the cases, developed for policymakers. So the main idea is to support evidence-based decision, which is important and is relevant. Don't take me wrong, I will never question that, but it's not designed to provide actionable information to the stakeholders, to the final users, no? Like learners, employers, or educators. So this is why in the ASAP, we are trying to follow a bottom-up strategy. So we are starting by documenting the needs from learners, educators, and employers to inform our assessment design, no? And trying to provide actionable information that can be delivered in real time to meet their needs. Once we achieve this, we really believe that it's way easier to aggregate these results in a way that can inform evidence-based policymaker and accountability and administration. But we first want to make sure that we meet the needs of the final users. No?
And I can tell you the folks on this call are definitely going to be excited about this bottom-up approach here. Tell us about the theory of action here, Javier.
Yes, so the theory of action. So this is, as Anson mentioned before, we are still trying to design how we can meet these needs. So what we're envisioning right now of how the system is going to work is that a particular, an individual, a learner or employee is going to access the ASAP system that again is not a fixed assessment as the ones that you have been probably interacting with, but more a digital warehouse. So it's going to be a digital platform where people can access digital components, digital modules on literacy and numeracy, and depending on the assessment that is going to be delivered, because it's going to be personalized, it's going to be associated with some action. That action is still to be decided and to be operationalized, but can be educate, train, hiring, certify, or promote. No? And all of this process will be developed from a culturally sustaining perspective that I know some people in the chat were actually commenting on this, on the lack of assessments from this perspective. So this will be one of them. So we go next. So yeah, another important component of the ASAP is design in real time. So we don't want to provide an assessment that is fixed for everyone. We really want to make it personalized, to make it it's adapted to the needs, because we know that one of the biggest challenges in the field of adult education is the high heterogeneity, the reality, as Anson was mentioning before, with all the digital devices, the reality that each learner needs to face in their daily life is very different from each other. No, so this is why the ASAP system, the way that we are designing this assessment, is going to deliver assessments in real time based on the testing purpose, whether, for example, the learner is interested in identifying stress and weaknesses, whether it's interested, to use that information to find a new job, to promote in their job, to upscale because, a new technology has been incorporated in their job. And we want to also make sure that this personalization reflects sociocultural characteristics and fund of knowledge, no? Like, what is that person bringing to the assessment? We don't want to assess people in topics that they are not interested in or that they are not useful for them. So this is why it's very important that all of this decision making is going to help enhance and improve the testing experience, not like the assessment experience. So if we go next. Scaffolding assessment. This is also one of our most important components in the adult skill assessment program. For the past year, we have been conducting interviews and focus groups with the different stakeholders. So right now, it doesn't mean like we will probably focus on others afterwards, but right now we are focusing on the needs of learners, educators, and employers. So we have been speaking with them for the past year, and we have started identifying what are common threads, no, across the different stakeholders. So if we go next, from learners, we keep listening, like they want flexibility, they want more time to take the assessment, they want to be able to navigate, to go back and forth in the assessment system, kind of, you know, like to give them the flexibility to stop and to continue in another moment, you know, to really adapt to their personal lives. From educators, what we keep listening is like we have assessments that are already aligned to standards, but we don't have assessments that are aligned to curriculum, no? Beyond, obviously, the classroom assessments that each teacher might be doing in their classroom. But they want something like can be cohesive and consistent, not only with the academic standards in the academic context, but also to curriculum, to what they are teaching, no? And from employers, I think the most clear message that we are hearing from them is like they have a need to identify and train employers in demand skills, no? Skills that in jobs that are being automatized, that are including new technologies. So they really want to identify what are the skills required, no, to be able to navigate the 21st century, the technology-driven 21st century. So the good news is like there are some overlapping needs across the different stakeholders. So everyone agrees on we want more information, detailed, item level information. They want to know what they did right, what they did wrong. They want tasks and items and questions to be contextualized, to be content specific in the workplace, in the classroom, in their daily lives, you know, like be able to manage in case of the numeracy, to manage their bank accounts. So, you know, like really like to make it relevant within a context, no? And making accessible, not only, as I mentioned before, from a culturally sustaining perspective for, you know, historically minoritized populations in the United States, but also to English learners that, as we know, is half or more of the adult population, of the adult learner population, and also students with disabilities, no? So if we go next, this is a little bit the way that we are trying to respond to these needs, no? So the first step is trying to identify curriculum that is developed from a culturally sustaining perspective, so that the task development is built on that curriculum. Find content-specific ways to representing the tasks. Like, again, in this case, like the most relevant, probably not only that are relevant outside of the classroom, so inside, but also outside of the classroom, like in the workplace, in the family, in the community. We click next, like that gives access to different language versions. Yeah, click next, like, and we provide, I mean, basically, like we use technology not to provide barriers, but to remove them. Like basically provide access through widgets, tools, calculators, spreadsheets. So in this case, any resource that can help them navigate the task, no? Like not necessarily that you need to have higher digital skills to be able to do it, but that the digital environment will help them to navigate, no? Yeah. So one of the work that we have been doing for the past months, this is the end of the presentation. We just need a couple of more minutes. So we have been working with use cases. Some of one of our advisory committees, called the Needs Assessment Committee, suggested us, we really need to start thinking about how this assessment system is going to serve the users. So what we have been doing for the past months is identifying prototypical, this is like a hypothetical scenario. I'm sorry, as Anson mentioned before, I'm sorry to disappoint. The good news, well, the bad news is like the ASAP system is not fully operational yet. We are still designing. So that's the bad news. The good news is like you still have a chance to influence how we are going to develop this assessment system. So one of the ways that we are doing it is designing, like start thinking in use cases, who are the potential users of this system. No? And here I'm going to go very quickly through 3 examples. 2 of them have been developed by our experts in the ASAP team. Some of the guys that I saw the picture a few minutes ago. And the third one, actually, it was presented in COEP in Atlanta a few weeks ago, and we gathered information from the audience. So one of them is one prototypical example that we will like to design the system for is, in this case, like an independent retail store, like there is the adoption of a new technology in the working place. So it requires, this is kind of targeting middle skill workers that requires to upscale their digital skills to respond to the demands of the workplace. No? And the way that we will be doing this is trying to align academic content standards like CSRSA with ONET, with, detailed work activities provided by rich data sets like the US Department of Labor ONET, like a huge occupational data set that we could extract detailed work activities that are in demand so that we could, give information at that level. No? Another example that it's becoming also quite representative of many learners out there is the case of a long-term unemployed learner. No, so in this case, the user, the principal user of the system will be a learner that hasn't worked for 10 years. So in this case, the background is like that person has been at home taking care of their parents. No, so and right now it requires to go back to the labor market to receive some income, but that person cannot even work full time. It will have time. No, but during these 10 years, her skills and her knowledge got outdated. No, so that will be the main reason why that person will access the subsystem to train and to upscale into in-demand skills that are required to find a new job. No, and the last example, in this case, again, this was actually one of the exercises that we did during the pre-conference session at COEP this year. And this was one of the examples that the audience was suggesting. No, this case is like the main stakeholder, the main user will be like a learner with literacy levels, following educational function levels, 0, 1. So in this case, and this is something that we really care in ASAP, and actually we are trying to think in alternative ways to talk about low literacy and beginning literacy, and maybe possibilities talking about limited opportunity to learn, no? Like learners that they didn't have the chance to learn that skills, like maybe like myself, like English is not their mother tongue, so they need to upscale, and they never had the opportunity to learn those skills. No, so this is a little bit where the work that we have been doing. If we go next, I provide there like a QR code, so we will be more than happy if anyone in the audience wants to scan this QR code. Will access like a Jamboard. It will be active after the webinar today. So feel free to join, to access this Jamboard anytime and provide comments, suggestions, ideas. Just, create like a new one and, use the post-it. There are instructions there as well, but you can give us ideas about what do you think are the final users? What is the best way that the ASAP system can contribute to change the landscape of adult education. So thank you very much.
All right. Hey, this has been fantastic, and we've got time for questions. I've been checking out the chat. I know Maria has too. One thing that was kind of popping in there quite a bit was the idea of doing something that seems so highly customized in a program with, for example, 2,000 students. Like, so this scaling and this volume aspect that many of our big programs have. So let's think about that, and you guys can talk about maybe some models there. The other thing that jumped out at me was several folks, and I know we've talked about this frequently in our groups. We're talking about like how any technology delivery adds this overlay of constraint for assessing already. And I know we've talked a lot about that, but Maria or Javier, I want to address either one of those, or Maria, anything that you saw in the chat that jumped out.
So something like just a little bit about the sharing of the slides in the Q&A.
Oh yeah. We'll definitely be sharing the slides out for you guys, and COAVE's got those in their inbox already. So those will be coming your way.
And then on the Q&A, there was another question about once the assessments are built and conducted, will the results show gained knowledge? Will they be used for performance evaluations to determine race increases? That's a great question. And I think we're working on identifying the purposes of the test. And that's something that our focus right now is more informative assessments rather than high stakes promotion related assessment purposes. So I guess the question is, the answer would be no. That's not our primary focus at all. And will ASAP be applying for NRS use approval with Octave? I think that's a open question at this point.
Yeah, we're definitely going to be watching how the NRS evolves and have a strategy to kind of bring our knowledge, because the Department of Ed funded this, and we do know in the WIOA reauthorization bills that have been out there on the table with Congress that new assessment models are being called for. So we're going to be ahead of the game, I think, in terms of that context. Things will have to change in what we do in the NRS because it's so woefully out of date, and probably acts as a major constraint to the deployment of things like IET, because the tests don't measure what IET students are learning. And so we're really building around the policy context while we build the actual assessment context of it, because we've got to make sure that those things match, because that's just a major objective for everybody here on a call like this, and for our adult learners that are accessing our programs. Great comments. Anything else that jumped out in the chat from anybody? I saw a reference to Equip for the Future. Love that. Yes.
So some of
us
the
are very
questions
involved.
about the couple of thousand test takers, I think
Yes.
at this point in time, we're building the back end. We're working on the technology. So, we have to figure out some of those details, but that's associated with a platform that could enable the individualization of large numbers of test takers.
Excellent.
Yeah, I would just like to add, just connecting with some of the question in the chat and in the Q&A, and kind of piggybacking what Maria said, like we are very aware of, and we will try to minimize as much as possible, like any unintended consequence that is not a positive for the learner. Like in this case, I think what is clear, and we have actually in our website that we can put in the chat, but also in the presentation, our assessment beliefs, And I will recommend everybody to go there and to read our principles, like the principles that we are following for developing this assessment. And we really try to make an assessment system to support learning. So it's an assessment for learning, to help improving, to help upscaling. And then we are very careful still deciding what type of information we're going to give back, analyzing the potential, intended and unintended consequences, making sure that any information that we're going to be back to the learner or any other stakeholder is going to be to improve their lives and not necessarily have like a negative consequence. So this is why we are still very careful in terms of identifying potential uses for accountability that will have like high stake consequences for the learner. So right now we are focusing on the formative component of the assessment, like making sure that it can be used for learning.
Fantastic. Well, I want to thank all of our speakers here. This has been great. The chat has been on fire, and I really want to applaud everybody for your contributions here. We are taking note of them, and the Q&A. We've got 5 questions in there that we will definitely be looking at. But these things are only as good as the feedback that we get from you folks, and you did an A+ job right now. So I'm closing it out for the ASAP team and for this presentation. And if COAVE has some evaluations they want to run at the beginning here, please, or at the end, please fill those out before you log off. And thank you all for your great contributions today. And we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anson. Thank you all.